The laughter was brittle. It bounced off the marble walls like glass about to crack. She stood just past the archway, half hidden behind the curtain, holding a silver tray that trembled slightly in her hands. The wine glasses on it rang together, soft and uninvited, like they too sensed what was coming. "I mean," he said, swirling his drink with a grin too wide for the joke he hadn't finished yet, "if the kid can't handle a fever, how's he going to survive the world? Life's not charity." "It's natural selection." A burst of laughter followed from the other side of the table. Forced, polished, expensive. She didn't move. The tray didn't slip, her expression didn't change, her breathing didn't shift, but something deep within her, buried between long hours and sleepless nights, curled inward like a fist. He didn't know she was listening. Or maybe he did. Maybe he thought it didn't matter. After all, she was the maid. The one who moved through rooms like air. The one who brought coffee and vanished. The one whose silence he mistook for absence. She stood still until the laughter turned toward another topic. Stocks. Real estate. A new membership at some mountain club. The kind of world where jokes like that were tossed like confetti and swept up by people like her. When she finally stepped into the room, her face was calm. Not cold, not shaken, just still. She placed the tray gently on the side table and refilled glasses with practiced ease. He didn't look at her. He rarely did. She existed on the edge of his vision, useful but invisible. She moved through the rest of the evening without speaking. But something had shifted. Not in how she served him. That remained perfect. Icy water with lemon, napkins folded sharp. But the way she looked at him had changed. No longer soft, no longer neutral, just quiet and knowing. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the laughter had faded, she sat on the edge of her bed in the small room behind the kitchen, listening to the sound of her son breathing through the baby monitor. His breathing was light but steady. The medicine was working today. She whispered a prayer into the dark, the same one she said every night. But this time, her voice carried something new. Steel. He didn't know her son, had never seen him, didn't know the hospital bills she stacked beside her paychecks or the tears she swallowed each time he ran a fever. He had never heard the stories she told to make her boy laugh through the pain or how she held his hand through the needles and the fear. He didn't know what it took to get through the world with a sick child and no time to cry. But she knew. And now, she knew something else. That his words had carved something deep. Not fear, not shame, but resolve. Because she wasn't just cleaning his floors anymore, she was watching, remembering. And though he couldn't see it yet, the way she saw him had changed forever. The bus always arrived just before sunrise. She sat near the back, forehead resting against the window, eyes half closed but never truly asleep. The city outside was still dark, lit only by flickering street lamps and headlights. She carried a canvas tote with her uniform folded neatly inside and a small plastic bag with crackers for later. Her wallet was thin. Most of her money went to medicine. Each transfer between buses cut into her time. Sometimes she missed one and arrived late, never enough to be noticed by her employers, but enough to shave minutes off the precious hours she had to breathe between jobs. They never asked how far she traveled. They only knew she showed up. Her son's picture lived inside her phone case. She checked it every time the world got too heavy. A wide smile, big eyes, a piece about him that never seemed to match his body's fragile limits. He was small for his age. Asthma. Autoimmune complications. Doctors had names for it all, but she just called it the thing she had to beat every day. He loved books. Not cartoons, not games. Books. Even when he was too tired to lift his head, he would ask her to read. Stories about oceans and space and talking lions. She read to him with a soft voice even after her shifts left her hoarse. Sometimes he fell asleep mid-sentence, hand curled in her sleeve like he was afraid she might vanish. Every payday was a puzzle. Rent first. Always rent, then food, then prescriptions. There was rarely anything left, but she still found a way. She borrowed coupons from neighbors. She walked instead of taking cabs. Once, she pawned her earrings to cover a specialist appointment. They had been a gift from her grandmother. She didn't hesitate. She had worked in many houses, big ones with glass walls and quiet carpets. No one ever said thank you. They assumed she was lucky to be there. They spoke around her, not to her. She memorized every preference, every stain on every rug, and how to disappear when conversations turned ugly. Some days she smiled through it, some days she just endured. But she always came back, because at the end of the day, There was a little boy waiting with questions about constellations and dinosaurs, a boy who asked if the clouds ever got tired, a boy who hugged her like she was made of something stronger than she felt. He never complained. Not about the coughing or the hospital visits or the way other kids looked at him during recess. He just kept going the same way she did. Quietly, bravely. As if he knew she needed him to believe. She didn't cry often. There was no time. But some nights, when the bus was late and her feet were blistered and the medicine cost more than she had, she would hold his picture to her chest and whisper, "I've got you. Always." And she meant it. Every word. He lit his third cigar of the evening with hands that didn't feel like his own. They trembled slightly, but he told himself it was the draft, or the coffee, or maybe just age. The hallway outside his office echoed faintly with footsteps, then quiet again. He sank into the leather chair behind his desk and opened the latest market report, eyes scanning the numbers without really seeing them. He hadn't slept in 2 nights, maybe 3. The ceiling had become familiar in the dark, its plaster patterns warping into strange shapes as the hours dragged on. At first, he thought it was just stress. Nothing more. Too many late nights, too many obligations, the company merger, the endless meetings, but the headaches had started last week, then the shortness of breath. Then the dizziness, sharp and sudden, like the floor wanted to tilt beneath him. He kept a bottle of wine under the desk now, expensive, aged, something that should be savored but was instead poured like water into his glass. He joked with guests that it kept the edge off. But when he was alone, it barely dulled the buzzing behind his eyes. He hadn't told his wife. She was in Milan for a gallery opening and wouldn't be back until next Thursday. He didn't want to worry her. And he certainly wasn't going to a doctor. Not yet. It would pass. He was sure of it. The staff noticed the change. The driver was the first to comment on how pale he looked. The chef offered to switch to lighter meals. The housekeeper began cleaning more quietly, as if the air itself had changed. But none of them said it out loud. Not to his face. Not when he still spoke with that sharp tone. Not when the money still moved. Except her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't break the routine. But one evening, after clearing away the remnants of a client dinner, she placed a glass of water beside his office door. No words. Just a quiet gesture. He saw it an hour later, still cool, a slice of lemon floating lazily at the top. He stared at it for a long moment before picking it up and drinking without thought. The next night, it was there again. And again after that. Sometimes in a ceramic mug. Sometimes in crystal. Always with lemon. Always full. He never acknowledged it. Not directly. He would glance toward the door after she passed, catching only the edge of her uniform vanishing around the corner. Once she met his gaze as she entered the room to collect plates. Her eyes didn't ask. They simply knew. The walls of his house were tall, the gates always locked. He had built his life like a fortress, surrounded by glass and silence. But lately, it didn't feel so strong. The walls didn't feel so steady, and the quiet was no longer peaceful. There were cracks forming, tiny ones, hairline fractures in the rhythm of things, and for the first time he wasn't sure if they would stay small. The house was quiet, in that strange, heavy way that only exists deep in the night, the kind of silence where even the walls seem to hold their breath. She stood at the sink, rinsing the last of the dishes from a late dinner no one had thanked her for. The light above her flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the garden was still. No wind. No movement. The world resting. Then came the sound. Not loud at first. Just a muffled thud, like something soft falling against wood. Then a sharper crash. Glass, maybe. A groan. Not a dream, not her imagination. Real, heavy, human. She didn't hesitate. The towel dropped from her hands and she was already moving. Steps fast but careful across the tiled floor. She took the back stairs 2 at a time, her pulse hammering. The house was too big. Too dark, every hallway stretching longer than it should have. No other voices, no other footsteps. The chef had gone home after cleanup. The driver had left after dropping off the last guest. The security guard outside wouldn't hear anything through the thick walls. She turned the corner and saw him. He was slumped against the far wall of the upper hallway, half sitting, half collapsed, one hand clutching the baseboard as if it might steady the spinning world around him. His face was pale. His shirt soaked with sweat, his breathing short and sharp, each inhale catching like a faulty engine. A broken wine glass glittered nearby, shards scattered across the floor like ice. For a moment he didn't see her. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. Then they flicked toward her and widened. He tried to speak, but the words came out broken. A name, maybe hers, maybe not. His mouth moved again, slower this time. Help me. She was already kneeling beside him, careful not to touch the wrong place. His pulse was fast, too fast. His skin felt cold. The bravado he wore like a suit was gone. There was no sharpness in his voice now, no sarcasm, only fear, raw and real. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Don't leave. His voice cracked on the second word. She shook her head once. I'm not. Her voice was steady, calm, measured. She reached into her apron for her phone, called the emergency number, gave the address, the details, her voice a quiet thread holding the moment together. He tried to sit up. Failed. She steadied him with one arm, the other still gripping the phone. He leaned into her, shoulders shaking. I didn't think this would happen, she said nothing. Just kept him upright. In that moment, the air between them changed. It wasn't employer and maid, not power and obedience. Just two people in the middle of a silent house, one trying to breathe, one trying to keep him alive. The ambulance would come soon, the lights, the noise, the questions. But for now, in the hush of early morning, all that existed was his fear, her strength, and the echo of a life cracking open. His breathing was shallow but steady now. She had helped him sit upright, his back braced against the wall just beneath the family portrait he used to pass without a glance. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat, collar askew. The cold from the floor was seeping into her knees, but she didn't move. Her arm supported his shoulder, the weight of him heavier than expected. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the distant sound of sirens growing louder. He didn't look at her when he started to speak. His voice was low, rasping, as if each word scraped its way out of him. I said something about your son, didn't I? She didn't answer. He already knew. I remember it now. That night. Dinner. I thought it was funny, thought I was being clever. He shook his head slightly, eyes still fixed on the floor ahead of him. It wasn't. It was cruel. I knew it the second I saw your face the next day. She kept her eyes forward, not because she couldn't look at him, but because she didn't want to interrupt the unraveling. His pride had cracked hours ago. Now something deeper was splintering. I say things like that to make myself feel big, he said, voice trembling. Always have. Tear someone down before they can see the cracks in me. He let out a dry laugh that turned quickly into something else. His shoulders began to shake. The laugh dissolved into tears. He didn't cry like someone afraid of dying. He cried like someone who had lived too long without ever being truly seen. Like someone who had spent decades building walls only to find they didn't keep the pain out. Only the people. I don't know how to stop, he whispered. Every time I feel small, I look for someone to step on. I used to think it made me powerful. Now I just feel empty. The sound of the sirens drew closer. Now, just outside. Flashing lights bounced through the tall windows, casting blue and red shadows across the hallway. Still, he didn't move. I see you now. I mean, really see you. You were always there, taking care of things, never asking for anything. And I mocked your son, a child, just to fill the silence in me. She looked at him then. His face was blotched with tears, jaw trembling. Not the man who once barked orders from behind his desk. Not the voice that dismissed her without thought. Just a man who had finally run out of lies to tell himself. She didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't, but she didn't let go. The paramedics arrived and moved quickly, lifting him onto a stretcher, asking questions she answered calmly. He reached for her hand before they rolled him away. Thank you, he said. But what he really meant was, I'm sorry. And for once it sounded real. The knock on the door came just after noon. Light, unsure, as if the hand behind it had almost turned away. She wiped her hands on a towel and looked through the peephole, then froze. She hadn't expected him. Not here, not at her door. She opened it slowly. He stood on the porch, holding a paper bag in one hand, a box wrapped in silver in the other. No suit, no watch, just a button-down and slacks that looked like they hadn't been pressed. His hair was still neat, but something in his face had softened. He looked smaller in daylight. I didn't want to call first, he said. Didn't know if you'd pick up." She stepped aside. He entered carefully, almost timid, like the hallway might reject him. Her apartment was small, clean, filled with sunlight and the quiet scent of lavender. A stack of books sat on the coffee table. Drawings lined the fridge, bright with color and uneven letters. He glanced around with a kind of awe that bordered on guilt. This wasn't the world he knew. This was a world someone fought hard to protect. She gestured toward the sofa. He sat, awkward, hands resting on his knees, the paper bag crinkled in his lap. "I brought this," he said, lifting the wrapped box. "A little something. For your boy." She didn't take it. Not yet. From the hallway, footsteps approached. Small ones. Her son peered around the corner, cautious but curious. She gave him a gentle nod. The boy stepped forward, wide-eyed but calm, his arms hanging loosely at his sides. The man stood, clearing his throat. "Hi there," he said. "I'm a friend of your mom's. I was hoping we could meet." He offered the gift. The boy took it without speaking. He turned it in his hands, examining the corners, then smiled. "Thank you." The man looked as though that one word had cracked something in his chest. He sat again, slower this time. "Your mom told me you like science," he said. "Space and stars. The gift has something about that, I think." The boy nodded, still inspecting the box. He didn't open it yet, just held it gently, like something worth waiting for. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed lightly, watching. The room was quiet except for the sound of a bird outside and the low hum of the refrigerator. She didn't speak. She wanted to see how long he would stay. He looked around once more, eyes resting briefly on a framed photo of her and her son, then on the shelf of medications near the kitchen. He seemed to notice everything now, not like before. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I've said it before, I know, but I needed to say it here, in this place." He looked at her then. Really looked. She held his gaze, steady and unreadable. She didn't tell him he was forgiven. She didn't ask him to leave. She just let the moment be. And in its silence, he sat still, unsure whether his presence meant anything at all. But he stayed. The air inside the mansion felt different, not louder or busier, just quieter in a way that made people slow down. The staff moved through the halls with the same precision, the same rhythm, but there was something new layered beneath the routine, a stillness that felt less like tension and more like consideration. No one said it outright, but they all felt it. He had returned from the hospital thinner, a little slower, but more present. He no longer barked orders from behind his desk. He didn't snap when coffee arrived a minute late. He asked questions now. Simple ones. Did you sleep well? How is your family? They didn't come out smooth at first. The words sometimes caught in his throat like a language half forgotten, but he said them anyway. It was the maid who noticed the change most clearly. Not in gestures or grand confessions, but in what was no longer there. The biting sarcasm, the impatience, the invisible wall between staff and man of the house. It hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had cracked. Enough to let light through. He learned her son's name without asking her directly. She found out through the nurse who managed his schedule. He had it written down on a notepad near his phone. Just the name, nothing else. And then, one day, quietly, the boy's next round of treatment was paid in full. No announcement, no receipt left out by accident, just a notice from the clinic that the balance was gone. She didn't thank him. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because he didn't ask for gratitude. It wasn't about being forgiven, it was something else, something quieter. Like penance whispered into a room no one was in. He never brought up that night again. Not the fall, not the tears, not the confession that had broken him open on the cold floor of his own hallway, but the absence of words held weight. It was an unspoken thread stretched between them, not fragile, but earned. Every morning when she arrived just before sunrise, he was already awake, sitting near the window, coffee untouched beside him. And when she entered the room, he looked up. "Good morning," he would say, her name included, always. Not a formality, not a habit, but a greeting that carried intention, as if he understood what it meant to say it right, as if he now realized that calling someone by name was a kind of respect too often withheld. The others started to follow. The chef asked about her son's school, the driver offered her the front seat when dropping off deliveries. The walls inside the mansion remained tall, but the air no longer pressed down so hard. She moved through the house with the same grace as always, but now, when she looked at him across the room, she no longer saw a man too proud to see his own reflection. She saw a man who had fallen, who had broken, and who was learning, slowly, how to stand in a different way. And that was enough.